You wake to the smell of burning tallow and tar. The air tastes of ash before you even open your eyes. Outside your narrow wooden window, the bells are clanging, not in prayer, but in panic. It is September 2nd, 1666, and the night sky above London is not black, but red. You can hear screaming from Pudding Lane, a sound like dry timber snapping. The fire has jumped from one baker's house to another, and the wind off the Thames turns every spark into a whip of flame. The roofs groan, then fall. The gutters run not with water, but melted lead. You press a cloth to your mouth, but the smoke slips in anyway, thick and oily. This is not a fire you can outrun. You are not a tourist in time. You are a witness. If you can still breathe through the smoke, take a moment before the next building falls. Subscribe to this channel if you value stories told from the ashes, stories that don't ask for comfort, only truth. Comment where you're listening from, and what hour of the night you found yourself in. Your city might be standing now, but every great city burns eventually. It began in silence, one of those windless autumn nights when the river lies still, reflecting the lanterns of ships moored tight against the docks. You live among the narrow alleys of the City of London, a maze of timber-framed houses that lean into one another like drunken men. The streets are so tight that neighbors can shake hands through the upper windows. Here, the poor sleep above workshops, bakers, tallow chandlers, coopers, brewers, where ovens and open fires burn through the night. Only a year earlier, London had survived the Great Plague of 1665, a horror that carried away nearly a quarter of its people. The pits of Aldgate had barely cooled before the city returned to trade, to hunger, to smoke. Rats still moved along the riverbanks. The stench of tallow, urine, and spoiled beer clung to the air, but people were alive, and in 1666, that felt like mercy enough. Your name isn't written in any chronicle, because you are one of the thousands, the silent class who sweep the ash from bakeries and empty chamber pots into the ditch. You live 3 streets away from Thomas Farriner's bakery on Pudding Lane, where the fire will start. The Farriners had closed their ovens that night, or so they thought, but somewhere deep inside the bread room, an ember smoldered, a red eye beneath the ash, waiting for air. At 1 in the morning, the first cry went up. The maid, the only one to die in the house, failed to escape. By the time buckets were fetched from the river, the wind had already turned. The thatched roofs caught like dry leaves. The fire leapt across Fish Street Hill and into the next row of houses. London's houses were built of wood, plastered with pitch and filled with straw bedding. Each was a match waiting for a spark, and sparks were everywhere, falling, swirling, feeding. Within an hour, 50 houses were gone. The Lord Mayor, Sir Thomas Bloodworth, was called from his sleep. He arrived, squinted at the blaze, and muttered the infamous words, "A woman could piss it out." Then he went home. But the wind was rising. By dawn, the fire front was half a mile wide. The bells of St. Magnus, St. Margaret, and St. Lawrence all began to ring at once, each swallowed by the same roar. The sky turned a violent orange, and people began to run, not toward the fire, but away from it, carrying children, cages of birds, trunks of cloth, and whatever they could lift. As you stand in the crowd on Thames Street, the heat is already unbearable. The tar barrels stacked for the Navy's ships ignite one by one, sending black smoke rolling down toward the water. The surface of the Thames glitters with burning cinders. Men push carts, women pull ropes, horses collapse in their traces. Someone yells for gunpowder to make fire breaks, but no one knows who has the authority to give the order. The fire will burn for 4 days. It will consume 13,000 houses, 87 churches, and almost every building within the city walls. It will erase entire parishes, and yet, miraculously, kill fewer than a dozen people, at least. That's what the records say. But paper does not record those who burned unseen, or those buried without names. And through it all, you will stand among them, breathing in the ash of a city that was never meant to survive itself. You stand in the narrow alley of Pudding Lane, your bare feet blackened by soot and cinders that fall like dry snow. The air is heavy, warm, alive with something that hums and crackles, a sound that seems to come from the bones of the city itself. It is the early morning of September 2nd, 1666, and London is about to learn what happens when wood, wind, and pride conspire against the poor. The street smells of burnt bread and animal fat. You can taste iron and smoke on your tongue. Around you, the night watchmen shout into the darkness, their cries broken by the wind. Fire. Fire in Pudding Lane, but few listen. Fires are common here. Londoners are used to the smell of burning, of ovens, forges, lamps, and hearths. You live in a city that cooks, warms, and lights itself with open flame. It is normal to wake to smoke. But this smoke is different. It rolls low, thick and oily, and the light behind it pulses like a beating heart. The bakery of Thomas Farriner, official baker to the Royal Navy, is at the center of it. Farriner's ovens had been lit late into the night, baking ship's biscuit for sailors. He swore he raked out the coals before going to bed, but deep in the oven, a coal smoldered under the ash, waiting for a gust of air. When the maid went down after midnight, the flame had already found the timber beams. By the time she screamed, it was too late. She was the first to die, the first of many. The baker and his family escaped through a window to the roof of a neighbor's house. But the fire leapt behind them like a chasing beast. The wind from the east, hot and dry after a summer drought, turned the small blaze into a living storm. It reached for the oil barrels, the timber stacks, the straw. Within minutes, the entire lane was burning. You hear the sound of collapsing wood, sharp, violent, final. Sparks whip through the air like fireflies. The walls seem to breathe, and as you run toward the river, you look back to see the street behind you become a tunnel of flame. The fire moves faster than a man can run. Samuel Pepys, a naval clerk who will later write the most detailed account of this disaster, is still in bed at Seething Lane. He will wake soon to a servant telling him that London burns. In his diary, he will write, "It made me weep to see it. But here, on the ground, there is no time for weeping. You see a mother clutching her child as sparks land in her hair. A man throws buckets of water that turn to steam before they hit the walls. The river glows red, as if it, too, were burning. By dawn, Fish Street Hill, Gracechurch Street, and St. Magnus Church are engulfed. The bells are melting. The Lord Mayor, Sir Thomas Bloodworth, finally arrives, but when urged to pull down houses to create a firebreak, he hesitates. A woman could piss it out, he says, before retreating to his coach. His words will haunt him for the rest of his life. The firefighters of London, volunteers with leather buckets, fire hooks, and hand pumps, are powerless. Their equipment is primitive, their courage real but useless. They tear at the walls with hooks, trying to make space between the burning buildings. But the fire eats faster than they can work. The wooden streets of the city of London, crowded, dry, and coated with centuries of soot, feed the inferno like tinder. You make your way toward the Thames, where crowds are forming. Families carry bundles of clothes, silverware, Bibles, and cages of birds. Some lead cows or pigs, hoping to save them. Others stand still, paralyzed by the sight of their world unmaking itself. On the river, boatmen begin to load passengers at extortionate prices. People fight for space on barges, pushing one another into the black water. From the Tower of St. Mary le Bow, flames leap 50 feet into the air. The sound is like 1,000 furnaces. Roof tiles burst with heat. Wooden beams explode as trapped air expands inside them. The fire feeds on everything: wood, wool, oil, and fear. It is not merely burning the city, it is devouring it. You cover your mouth with a cloth soaked in vinegar, as many do, hoping to block the smoke. It barely helps. The ash burns your eyes. The sky above is dark, yet glows a deep, angry red. The light makes faces ghostly and strange. Someone screams that St. Paul's Cathedral will surely stop the fire. That god will not allow his house to burn. But the wind has other plans. In the chaos, you see people tearing down furniture to feed their own small fires, burning what they cannot carry. So the flames take nothing of value. Horses stampede through the narrow streets, dragging carts and people beneath their hooves. A drunkard, his clothes aflame, runs screaming into the river. The fire makes no distinction between sinner or saint, noble or beggar. It takes all. The next hours blur into heat and terror. You see the London Bridge shrouded in smoke, flames licking at the northern end. Traders and dock workers shout for buckets. But the fire moves too fast. The bridge, already weakened by age, trembles under the weight of people fleeing across it. On the south bank, crowds gather, watching the inferno as if it were Judgment Day. By mid-morning, 300 houses are gone. The sky rains embers. The air is thick with the smell of roasted meat, and you cannot tell if it comes from animals or men. Bells, iron, glass, all melt into the same glowing river that runs through the city. You turn toward Tower Street, hearing rumors that the Tower of London's gunpowder stores may ignite. Soldiers begin to throw wet blankets over the barrels, terrified that one stray spark could blow half the city into the river. From the upper floors of warehouses, the rich throw down trunks and barrels filled with goods, silks, spices, coins. The poor scramble to catch them, risking burns and falling beams. In these moments, London's social order dissolves. There are no lords, no laborers, only survivors. That night, as you rest near the river's edge, the glow from Pudding Lane still burns in your eyes. The fire has not stopped, it has only begun to feed. You can hear distant churches collapsing one by one. The wind carries the sound of breaking glass, the hiss of boiling pitch, the faint prayers of those trapped in their attics. You realize that London, as you knew it, has already ceased to exist. The city is no longer a place, it is an open wound. And the wound is spreading. By dawn on September 3rd, 1666, you can no longer tell where the fire ends and the sky begins. The sun has not yet risen, but the heavens are already bright, painted orange and crimson by a fire that now stretches from the Tower of London to the Fleet River. You stand among the crowds on the riverbank, your face lit by a light that feels unholy. The heat on your skin is like standing before an open furnace. Every gust of wind carries ash, paper, and the faint smell of burning flesh. London is dying by inches. The fire, fanned by a relentless east wind, has become a monster with 1,000 tongues. The thatched roofs and timber walls burn as though soaked in oil. Whole streets vanish before your eyes. You can hear the roar, an endless animal growl that swallows every other sound. When beams collapse, they fall like thunder. When a church spire catches, it sends a shower of sparks high into the air, falling like stars onto the next street. Samuel Pepys, now fully awake and horrified, climbs to the Tower of All Hallows by the tower. Through his telescope, he watches as the fire races toward the warehouses of Thames Street. He will write later, the poor people staying in their houses till the very fire touched them, then running into boats, or clambering from one pair of stairs by the waterside to another. You are among them, the nameless, the ash-covered, the dispossessed. The cries of the crowd blend into a single, continuous moan. Mothers hold infants tight against their chests. Old men clutch walking sticks and stare blankly at the inferno that used to be their home. Dogs howl until their voices give out. The river itself seems alive, coated with burning debris. Barges drift by, carrying furniture, chickens, even entire families crouched among piles of bedding and chests. On the northern bank, St. Magnus the Martyr has fallen. Flames have crossed the streets and reached Cornhill and Cheapside, where merchants' shops once stood shoulder to shoulder. The cloth warehouses, filled with wool and linen, ignite like torches. The smell is unbearable, a blend of burning fabric, fat, and tar. By midday, soldiers are ordered to blow up houses to create fire breaks. Buckets and hand pumps have failed. The fire leaps over gaps faster than men can dig them. Gunpowder is now the only weapon left. You hear the first blast near Seething Lane. A hollow boom that shakes the ground beneath your feet. Smoke pours through the alleys in black coils. Walls crumble outward, spraying bricks like shrapnel. Yet even this desperate violence cannot halt the flames. Everywhere, people call upon God. You see priests leading prayers in the open air, their robes singed at the hem. Some say the fire is divine punishment for the city's greed and sin. Others whisper of Catholic plots, of foreigners setting fire to Protestant London. Crowds turn violent. A Frenchman carrying a loaf of bread is beaten nearly to death. Accused of arson, no one knows what is true anymore, only that everything familiar is burning. You stumble through Lombard Street, the ground beneath you glowing red from molten lead. The air burns your throat. Around you, barrels of brandy explode, fountains of fire bursting into the air. The Royal Exchange, pride of the merchants, collapses in a scream of twisting iron and wood. The bells of St. Lawrence Jewry melt and fall. Each clang is a death knell. In the afternoon, the wind shifts, driving the fire towards St. Paul's Cathedral. The great church, with its thick stone walls, is believed to be indestructible. It has survived storms and centuries. People flee there with carts of books, manuscripts, and treasures from the printing houses of Fleet Street. The cathedral's crypt becomes a refuge for the city's most valuable possessions. You join the stream of bodies climbing Ludgate Hill, carrying whatever you can salvage: a small wooden cross, a loaf of bread wrapped in cloth. But what you find at the top of the hill chills you more than the fire. The lead roof of St. Paul's has begun to soften. Smoke seeps from between the stones like breath from a dying man. Sparks from nearby houses have landed on the scaffolding that surrounds the cathedral. Where workers had been repairing it, the dry wood catches first. Within minutes, the entire frame is a ladder of fire climbing toward heaven. At sunset, the cathedral ignites. The lead on the roof flows down the sides like a river of silver. The massive stones crack in the heat. The sound is like cannon fire. People fall to their knees, screaming prayers, weeping as God's house collapses in on itself. Pepys will write, "All the roofs were molten, and the stones flew like grenades. You can feel the tremor through the ground. A wind of heat blasts through the crowd, pushing you back toward the river." All night, London glows like a furnace. The sky above the city is the color of blood. The flames reach so high they can be seen from Oxford. 50 miles away, you try to rest, but every breath tastes of soot. When you close your eyes, you still see the fire behind your eyelids. By morning, half of London is gone. The fire has destroyed the markets, the churches, the courts, and the homes of both rich and poor. The line between them is gone now. Nobles sleep beside beggars on the banks of the Thames. The king's soldiers patrol the ruins, their faces gray with ash. Somewhere in the distance, a cow moans, trapped beneath a fallen roof. But the fire is not finished. The wind has not died. It moves westward, toward the temple, toward the houses of the lawyers, the inns, and the crowded slums beyond. And once again, you rise, coughing, to follow the smoke. Because you have no choice. There is nowhere left to go that isn't burning. By the morning of September 4th, 1666, the fire has become something beyond comprehension. It is no longer a disaster but a landscape, a moving wall of heat that devours everything in its path. The city of London, once a humming labyrinth of trade and labor, is now a charred skeleton. The air itself seems to burn. You stand among thousands on the northern bank of the Thames, eyes watering from smoke that never lifts. The rich have already fled, their carriages loaded with furniture, portraits, and silver. But for you, and for the countless others who own nothing, the city has no mercy. You are the ones left behind. The wind still howls from the east, a constant, merciless breath feeding the flames. The fire now stretches more than a mile across. Whole neighborhoods, Cheapside, Newgate, Bread Street, Milk Street, exist only in memory. The streets are choked with people dragging carts, carrying bundles, pulling children by the hand. Horses scream. Dogs run mad. The poor huddle wherever they can. Under bridges. In the fields beyond the city wall. Along the banks where the smoke drifts thickest. Mothers nurse their infants under sheets of wet linen. Old men crouch over the embers of burned-out homes, poking through the ash for anything that might still be of use, a knife, a shoe buckle, a coin warped by heat. You pass by a group of apprentices, their faces streaked with soot. They carry buckets of water from the river, but the water itself feels hot. Each bucket steams before it even reaches the flames. The boys keep working anyway, eyes red, skin blistered, refusing to leave the street where they were born. One of them mutters, "We built this city with our hands. We'll not let it die." But the city doesn't listen. The Lord Mayor, Bloodworth, is gone, vanished from the chaos. In his place, King Charles II himself rides into the smoke with his brother, the Duke of York, directing soldiers and volunteers to blow up houses. You see them briefly through the haze, the king's face pale, his wig coated in ash, shouting orders as explosions ripple through the streets. The soldiers are weary, their hands blackened from gunpowder. The blasts echo across the ruins, one after another, shaking windows that are no longer there. For a moment, it almost seems to work. Gaps open between the burning streets, and the flames hesitate, only to leap across again, carried by the wind like a curse. Each new explosion feels like a heartbeat, a pulse of destruction in a city already dying. In the marketplace, looters pick through half-burned stalls. A woman drags a sack of grain through the mud, coughing as ash falls around her. The smell is unbearable now, a mixture of scorched flesh, rotting food, and smoke thick as oil. You breathe through your sleeve, but it makes little difference. The Thames, once a refuge, has become a place of desperation. People have built floating rafts from doors and barrels, hoping to drift to safety. Some never make it. Their makeshift crafts overturn in the dark water, weighted down by their few possessions. The current carries their bodies downstream, silent and smoking, their clothes still smoldering. From the southern bank, you watch as St. Paul's Cathedral, which had glowed red through the night, collapses completely. The sound of its fall is not one of fire but of stone, final, echoing, like the city's own heartbreaking. The ash that rises afterward drifts for miles, falling like gray snow over fields and farms beyond London. In the streets that remain, panic becomes hunger. The bakeries are gone. The markets are ash. People fight for scraps of bread carried in carts from the countryside. Prices double overnight. A loaf of bread costs more than a week's wage. Soldiers are forced to guard the few surviving granaries. You see one man shot dead after trying to steal from a cart. The crowd barely reacts. Everyone is too tired to mourn. The fire rages into the western wards, consuming Holborn, Fetter Lane, and the Temple. Lawyers' chambers, filled with centuries of records and scrolls, become pyres. The documents that define debts, laws, inheritances, everything that orders life, are turned to smoke. In a single night, paper wealth becomes air. You meet an old woman clutching a bundle wrapped in cloth. She tells you it holds the bones of her husband, taken from the plague pit at Aldgate the year before. He won't burn again, she says, her eyes empty. You do not know how to answer. Around her, the fire glows brighter, licking at the edges of the field where refugees sleep. The city's church bells have all melted. The silence that follows is worse than the sound. The only thing left to hear is the fire itself, crackling, roaring, sighing. It seems to breathe, to move with intent. People whisper that the devil walks through the flames, that they have seen him in the glow. Others fall to their knees, begging God to end it. As night falls, you find yourself among the ruins of Fleet Street, where the printers once worked. The air smells of ink and ash. Scraps of half-burned paper drift through the darkness. Songs, sermons, and proclamations all turn to cinders. You catch one in your hand. A single word remains legible: mercy. Behind you, an explosion shakes the ground. The temple church has gone up, its roof collapsing into a sea of embers. Sparks rise and dance above the blackened river. You can feel the heat on your back as you turn to run, tripping over bodies of men who collapsed in the smoke hours ago. Some still move, others do not. The fire continues westward through the night, consuming the last of the old city. The air pulses with red light. Somewhere in the distance, the king's men blow another street to pieces. It will not be enough. When morning comes, the east wind finally begins to die. The smoke hangs heavier, lower, clinging to the ruins like a shroud. You see what remains of London, fields of ash, chimneys standing like gravestones, walls without roofs, streets without names. And in that stillness, you realize, the fire has taken more than wood and stone. It has taken memory itself. The poor will never rebuild what they have lost, because no one will remember they were here. When the smoke begins to thin, you see what no Londoner was ever meant to see, the bones of the city laid bare. Where there were once cathedrals and counting houses, only blackened ribs of timber remain, reaching toward a sky the color of ash. It is September 5th, 1666, the fourth day of the fire, and still it burns, slower now, but deeper, eating into what little stands. You walk through Cheapside, once the proudest market in England. The cobbles beneath your feet are still hot, fused with lead and glass. The smell is unbearable, burnt tallow, singed hair, and something worse, sweet, thick, human. The stalls are gone, but their outlines remain, carved into the ash like ghosts. Apples have baked where they fell, blackened to cinders. Wine casks have exploded, leaving rivers of sticky red that run between the stones. A single brass scale lies melted into the ground, a reminder that here once stood the heart of trade. In the distance, the Guildhall, symbol of London's power, stands half destroyed. Its great roof has fallen. The statues that once crowned its entrance cracked and headless. The city that boasted of its order and wealth has become a graveyard of melted coins. Even the bells of Bow Church, which once tolled every hour, are silent now, their metal pooled like water around the foundations. You stop before what was once a row of fine houses belonging to the wealthy merchants of Cornhill. Their brick walls have survived where the timber of the poor has not. Yet when you peer inside, there is nothing left, only hollow rooms and the charred remains of staircases leading nowhere. On one blackened wall, a painting still clings by a single nail, a portrait of a woman whose face has been erased by soot. For 4 days, the fire has shown no mercy. It has spared neither churches nor palaces, neither charity nor greed. 87 parish churches are gone, their steeples collapsed into heaps of glowing rubble. Monuments of centuries turn to dust in hours. At Saint Sepulchre's, the pews burn like kindling. At Saint Bride's, the crypt caves in. Priests wander the ruins in silence, their eyes red not just from smoke but from disbelief. The markets, too, have fallen. Smithfield, Leadenhall, Newgate, where once thousands gathered to buy and sell. There is only ruin. The meat stalls have burned to the bone. The air still carries the faint stink of scorched flesh mixed with that of cattle fat and tar. Rats flee across the rubble, their bodies slick with ash, darting between the skeletons of oxen left half buried in the smoke. The warehouses along Thames Street are piles of molten iron, tar, sugar, rum, and oil. Everything that could burn fed the flames. The riverbank is coated in a greasy film. The Thames itself glows faintly in places, reflecting the red of the fires still burning in the west. You can hear wood crackle inside the hulls of docked ships as their tarred planks catch one by one. Not far from the river, St. Paul's Cathedral lies in ruin, its roof a melted cascade of lead that has run into the crypt below. The once grand pillars stand twisted, their tops split open like rotten fruit. On the stones are imprints of burnt books, pages turned to lace by fire. Thousands of manuscripts, works of theology, science, and art, are gone forever. The fire has not only devoured a city but erased its memory. And yet, Even here, life clings to the ashes. Amid the ruins, refugees build makeshift shelters from doors and planks scavenged from the rubble. They light small fires to warm themselves, irony lost in their exhaustion. Smoke from these pitiful flames mingles with the city's dying breath. In the fields beyond the walls, tents stretch as far as you can see. Entire families huddle beneath canvas, faces black with soot, coughing from the poisoned air. The rich have retreated to their estates, writing letters about charity. The poor are left to wait for food, for water, for someone to remember them. You pass a group gathered around a pit where coffins are being stacked, simple boxes. Hastily built, sealed with pitch, the records will later claim that only a handful died in the fire. But you can see the truth. Many bodies were burned beyond recognition, reduced to fragments swept into ditches. The numbers are guesses made by men who did not walk where you walk now. At Moorfields, people dig shallow wells, trying to find clean water. Others dig for treasure. Coins melted together in the shape of cups. Silver spoons fused to pewter plates. Children play with bits of slag, unaware that they hold what was once someone's fortune. When night falls, the city glows faintly, not from flame, but from heat still rising from the ground. The stones themselves are warm to the touch. The fire's main fury is over, but smaller blazes still flicker in hidden cellars. In the hollows of fallen beams, you can hear the soft crackle of what remains of London burning quietly into the earth. Samuel Pepys, returning by boat that night, writes of the scene. It made me weep to see how the stones of Paul's flew like grenades. And the poor people stayed in their houses till the very fire touched them. He calls it a sight fit for the end of the world. And it is. The city lies like a corpse under a blanket of smoke, its veins turned to ash. You move through the silence, your footsteps the only sound. Somewhere a bell still hangs, half melted, swaying slightly in the heat. A child cries in the distance, the sound small and human against the vastness of destruction. By morning, rain finally falls, thin, bitter, useless. The drops hiss on the hot stones, turning to steam before they touch the ground. It will take another full day before the last ember dies. When it does, the city of London is gone. 87 churches, 44 livery halls, 4 of its 7 gates, and more than 13,000 homes, reduced to soot. The Royal Exchange, the Custom House, and the very heart of English trade lie in ruin. Only a few stone walls and the tower itself remain standing, scarred but unbroken. And you, blackened with ash, stand where your home once stood, with nothing left but the sound of rain hissing on the bones of the city. For the first time in days, there is no fire, only silence. And somehow, that silence feels worse. The fire dies, but London does not breathe again. It coughs, it wheezes, it smolders. What remains is not silence but a strange kind of whisper, the hiss of cooling stone, the murmur of the displaced, the crackle of embers hidden beneath collapsed beams. You walk through what was once the heart of the greatest city in Europe, and every step feels like trespassing through a graveyard. It is September 6, 1666. The sky is pale, veiled in smoke that no wind can clear. The fire has finally burned itself out, but the air is still heavy with the stench of oil, soot, and decay. The ground beneath your feet is uneven, soft in places where cellars collapsed, sharp where glass has melted into jagged puddles. When you pass a wall, it sheds ash like skin. There are no birds, not one. The city that once echoed with the cries of gulls and ravens has become a void of silence. Only the faint buzzing of flies around the dead breaks it. Samuel Pepys, in his diary that day, writes, "I walked through the ruins, and it made me sick to see the great heaps of rubbish and the poor people carrying away in carts what they could." His words are clean. The reality is not. You see men digging through heaps of ash with bare hands, faces wrapped in cloth, searching for metal, for anything that can still be sold. The coins they find are fused together into lumps like molten fruit. The Thames, once black with smoke, now gleams gray under a sickly light. Floating debris still drifts along its surface, half-burned beams, shattered barrels, and the occasional body, bloated and pale. A soldier pushes one away with the butt of his musket, refusing to look down. Those who survived the flames now face something worse: disease. The city's wells are poisoned, filled with soot and dead rats. Food is scarce. The fire has destroyed bakeries, dairies, and markets. Thousands sleep in fields outside the walls, huddled under tents or scraps of cloth, drinking rainwater when it falls. Smallpox spreads first, then fever. The stench of rot seeps through every camp. You pass through more fields, now a city of refugees. Children cry from hunger. Men argue over barrels of spoiled grain. A woman sits rocking beside the ashes of her tent, whispering to someone who is not there. In the corner of the field, a man digs a trench, his seventh that day. When you ask who it's for, he just points to a line of shrouded figures waiting their turn. The king sends trucks of bread and wagons of coal to the camps, and his officers distribute them with solemn ceremony. But it is never enough. What the fire didn't burn, the looters took. In the shadows of burned-out houses, thieves cut purses from the dead. Soldiers patrol with muskets, but their faces are drawn, their eyes red from smoke and grief. And yet, life begins to stir amid the ash. You see a blacksmith salvaging a bent piece of iron, hammering it back into shape on a stone. You see women gathering bricks, stacking them in neat rows as if to rebuild. Someone has set up a stall selling bread baked in a makeshift clay oven. The crusts are gray with soot, but they sell out in minutes. Still, the fear lingers. The plague, which had claimed so many lives the year before, feels as if it waits just beyond the smoke. People whisper that the fire was God's punishment for sin, but others believe it was mercy, that the blaze had cleansed the city of pestilence. You can't tell which is true. The air smells of both death and renewal. On Fish Street Hill, a group of men dig out the cellar of a burned tavern. One finds a mass of bones fused together, animals, maybe, or people who couldn't escape. They bury what they find in silence, marking the spot with a charred beam. Later, others will claim that fewer than 10 people died in the fire. But you have seen too much to believe it. The truth is lost under the same ash that buries the poor. The survivors begin to mark their names on whatever walls remain standing, messages scrawled in soot. Alive. God save us. Seeking my wife. Some build rough crosses from broken beams, planting them in the ground like fragile prayers. By the river, merchants and masons gather under royal order. The king has called for London to be rebuilt, wider streets, stone walls, no more timber or thatch. Sir Christopher Wren, an architect with vision, walks through the ruins with parchment in hand, sketching what will become a new city. His eyes are bright, but his steps are careful. Even he must tread lightly among the dead. Still, not everyone will return. The poorest, who once filled the alleys of the old city, have no land, no rights, no savings. Their homes were built of nothing and now are nothing again. They wander from camp to camp, begging for work, for bread, for a place to sleep. Some drift into the countryside, vanishing like smoke themselves. One night, as you rest near Finsbury Fields, the air grows colder. The smoke above the city thins, revealing a sliver of moon. You can see the ruins stretching out for miles, faintly glowing as if the stones themselves still remembered the fire. It is beautiful in a way that makes you sick. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rings, one of the few that survived. The sound is weak but steady. You close your eyes, and for a moment, you can almost pretend London still lives. But when you open them, the horizon is gray. No spires, no rooftops, no light, just smoke and ruin. You are alive, but the city is not. And you understand, finally, that survival is not the same as living. The fire has gone, but it has left behind something colder than flame, a silence heavy with loss. You walk through the ruins in the pale light of dawn. The 8th of September, 1666. 5 days since the last ember died. The air is clearer now, yet it carries a ghost of the same smell, wood smoke, char, and the faint sweetness of things that once lived. The city is gone, but the city's divisions remain. The wealthy merchants return first. You see them standing among the ashes of their counting houses, wrapped in fine coats though the fabric is gray with soot. They speak of rebuilding, of insurance, of reclaiming their plots. Their words rise above the ruins like smoke, plans, profits, blueprints, deeds. For the poor, there are no deeds, only dust. You pass a woman in rags who once worked in a silk shop on Cheapside. She stares at the blackened stones where her master's house once stood. He's gone to Oxford, she says, but I've nowhere to go. Her eyes are red from smoke and grief. Around her, others sit among the debris, cooking scraps of grain in pots blackened by fire. The air is thick with coughing. No one has been paid in weeks. The city's guilds, the same that built London's greatness, are scattered, their members sleeping in tents. The king promises aid, but aid moves slowly. The royal treasury is strained, and talk of taxes fills the air. The rich fear loss, the poor fear starvation. Bread prices rise again. Refugees in Moorfields wait hours for crusts handed from carts by soldiers who no longer look anyone in the eye. But from ruin grows opportunity, for some. Land speculators move through the wreckage with notebooks, marking plots where houses once stood. They will buy what they can from desperate families for pennies. In a few years, their children will live in fine new squares of brick and stone. For now, they smile politely and offer sympathy that tastes of smoke. You stand near St. Paul's. Its shell still smoldering. Stones lie cracked like eggshells. The lead roof gone. The air still metallic from heat. Among the rubble, Sir Christopher Wren sketches quietly, a small figure against the enormity of loss. He draws wide streets and open squares, speaking softly of order and beauty, of a city reborn from reason, not greed. Those around him listen as if hearing prophecy. None notice the workers nearby burying what remains of the cathedral's caretakers in shallow graves. The poor rebuild with their hands. Long before Parliament gives permission, they use charred beams and broken bricks, patching together walls to keep out the wind. Children carry buckets of rubble to fill the holes in the streets. When the soldiers come to tear these makeshift homes down, because they block the king's plans, the people simply move a few yards and begin again. Survival has no patience for blueprints. Everywhere, there are arguments over blame. Some cry that Catholics set the fire, others blame the Dutch, the French, even God himself. A French watchmaker, Robert Hubert, is dragged before a court and forced to confess that he started the blaze. Though he was not even in London when it began, he is hanged before a cheering crowd, a sacrifice to fury rather than truth. His body swings above the same city that burned him in effigy first and in flesh later. The rich return to their houses rebuilt in stone. The poor rebuild theirs in timber because it is all they can afford. The same streets that once burned become crowded again, and the same fears settle like dust. Yet something has shifted. For a brief moment in the ashes, the gap between king and beggar seemed to close. Both had watched their homes vanish into smoke. But as walls rise once more, so too do the barriers between them. Still, there are moments when the city remembers its own humility. On the first Sunday after the fire, survivors gather in Moorfields for open-air worship. The ground beneath them is still warm, and their voices rise through the haze. The priest speaks of judgment and renewal. You look around and see faces of every kind, nobles, servants, sailors, widows, all kneeling on the same scorched earth. For once, no one looks down on anyone. That night, you walk along the Thames, where blackened ships still rock in their moorings. The river mirrors the stars faintly, broken by ripples of soot. London is quiet, as if afraid to breathe too loudly. But there, in the faint glow of lanterns, you see something astonishing. Carpenters and masons already at work. Hammers ring, saws bite into salvaged timber. The first sparks of rebuilding flicker in the dark. In the months that follow, new laws are passed. No more timber houses. No thatch roofs. Wider streets. Stone walls. The Rebuilding Act of 1667 will reshape the city forever. It will give birth to the London of brick and symmetry, of firebreaks and order. But for the poor, this new order will come at a cost. Their old homes are gone, and the new city has no place for them. Many will die in the outskirts, nameless, unrecorded, ashes among ashes. Years later, when the dust has settled and the city glitters once more, travelers will walk these same streets and marvel at how London rose from ruin. They will speak of resilience, of greatness reborn. They will forget that thousands never returned, that hunger and fever killed quietly what the fire did not. And you, standing where Pudding Lane once was, look up at the new houses of brick and slate. The street smells of baking again, sweet, warm, alive. A monument will rise here soon. A tall column of stone reaching into the sky. It will tell future generations how the fire began, how it consumed, and how it ended. It will not mention the names of the poor who burned unseen. You kneel, scoop a handful of gray dust from the ground, and let it fall through your fingers. The ashes of merchants and beggars mix without distinction. For a moment, you understand what the fire taught best, that in the end, all class, wealth, and power turn to the same dust. The fire destroyed London, but in doing so, it revealed what London truly was. You return to Pudding Lane years later, though the city around you no longer resembles the one that burned. The streets are wider now, paved and orderly, the buildings built of brick and stone that glow gold in the weak morning sun. No one remembers the smell of burning tar or the screams that once echoed through these alleys. London has grown proud again, strong, noisy, alive, but beneath the surface, the city still breathes the fire's ghost. At the top of the hill stands the monument, a great column of Portland stone designed by Sir Christopher Wren. It rises more than 200 feet into the air, the exact distance from here to the bakery where the first spark fell. You crane your neck to see the gilded orb at its summit, a flame carved in stone, forever frozen in the moment of ignition. Children laugh at its base. Merchants pass by without looking up. No one notices the words engraved in Latin along the plinth. Here, by the permission of heaven. The greatest part of this city was burnt down. You run your hand over the cold letters. The stone feels smooth, indifferent, but you remember what it hides, the heat that once split walls like fruit. The cries of those trapped beneath their roofs. The ash that fell so thick it muffled every sound but the fire's breath. The monument claims to honor the fire's end, but what it truly honors is survival, and survival, you've learned, is not the same as salvation. The city was reborn, yes, but not all were invited into its new life. The poor who once filled the alleys never returned. Their graves were dug without names. Their stories swept away like soot. In the grand rebuilding, they were remembered only as numbers, casualties of an event too vast for compassion. The chronicles will say the fire killed fewer than 20. You know it killed far more. Still, London rebuilt itself faster than anyone believed possible. The new streets are cleaner, the air freer of plague, the markets thriving again. But some nights, when fog settles over the river and the wind shifts from the east, the smell of smoke returns, thin, sharp, almost sweet. The older folk stop and look toward the river as if waiting for the sky to turn red once more. You think of all that was lost: 13,000 homes, 87 churches, a quarter of the city's heart. Yet what the fire consumed in days, time will consume again, slowly, endlessly. The buildings that rose from these ashes will one day crumble. 2. The fire only made visible what was always true. Nothing built by man lasts forever. As the evening bells begin to ring, you step back from the monument and look toward the rebuilt skyline. The domes and spires gleam against the setting sun. You can almost imagine the city at peace. But then a gust of wind stirs the dust at your feet. carrying with it the faint scent of old smoke. For a heartbeat, you hear again the roar of the inferno, the cries from the river, the collapsing spires. You close your eyes, and you are back there, in the heat, in the glow, in the sound of a world ending. When you open them, only the quiet remains. The city hums with life. Children's laughter drifts from the marketplace. A baker's bell rings from a nearby shop, summoning the scent of bread warm from the oven. It is almost the same smell that began it all. You walk away slowly, down streets rebuilt over the graves of the old ones, your shadow long against the cobblestones. Somewhere behind you, the monument catches the last light of day and burns gold against the dusk. And as you turn the corner, you understand. The fire never truly ended. It only changed shape. From flame to memory. From ruin to pride. From ashes to stone. Because cities, like people, must burn to remember what it means to live.